please call roll?
Sure thing. Looks like it's alphabetical. Maybe not. We'll find out. Adam Anderson. Darren Fleck.
Present.
Natalie Geisels. Absent. Christine Hull.
Present.
Mia Mansfield.
Here.
Adriana Publico.
Here.
Tyler Rogers. Present. Lauren Rushing.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. All right, we will move into our agenda items. So just some reminders for public comment. Comments are from the public are invited on items listed for possible action. A public comment card should be filled out and submitted to the recording secretary. You can see Kelly over here for that. You must include at least the name of the speaker on your card. It's pretty self-explanatory on the paper. The time limit is 3 minutes, and I think that's okay. So we are going to move into item 2.01. There was a typo on the agenda, but not on the minutes. The minutes are correct for September 21st, 2023. The agenda says September 13th. Just want to make note of that. So we are looking to approve the minutes from September 21st, 2023. So when a motion is made, if you could make sure you say the right date. Does anyone have any discussion or changes to the minutes from September 21st?
I'd like to move that the minutes from September 21st, 2023 are approved. That's Tyler Rogers.
Adriana Publico, second.
All right. Any additional discussion? Do we have any public comment on this item, by the way, before we vote? Sorry, I should have asked.
No public comment.
Okay, thanks. All right. If
Pablo
Okay.
Navarron.
we'll hold on the motion then. Pablo?
I got one question for you. So I saw all those Sonic Spanish Springs. Only one thing that doesn't match it is did not concern rezoning to midnight. I sort of want an answer, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we need to redo the motion or can we? No, we're good. Okay. All right, so all those in favor of approving the minutes from September 21st, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, now we're gonna move into the meat of our meeting today. Item 2.02, discussion and possible action regarding enrollment boundary adjustments impacting John Bohatch Elementary School, Bud Beasley Elementary School, Jesse Hall Elementary School, Miguel Sepulveda Elementary School, Spanish Springs Elementary School, Alice Taylor Elementary School, Edward Van Gorder Elementary School, Yvonne Shaw Middle School, Lou Mendive Middle School, Sky Ranch Middle School for the 24-25 school year. Again, this item is for possible action. This is our second meeting on this. We had intended to try to be in the community, and technology was not did not happen for us this year, but we did get several email public comments, so we can hopefully everybody saw those in their email today, and then we have some audience members that we will get to right after our presentation. So we will turn it over to Adam for some updated maps, more maps.
Thank you. Good evening. Adam Searcy, Chief Operating Officer for the school district. I'm going to go quickly through a number of these first slides. We did discuss these and share them publicly a month ago. But as the lengthy agenda item describes, quite a number of Spanish Springs area elementary schools and middle schools on the item for discussion. Of course, the WCSD promise about knowing all of our students by name, strength, and need. So they can graduate prepared for the future they choose, and delivering on that with our families and community. Thank you again, all of you, for being here tonight. Really appreciate your time and effort, as well as members in the audience. Just to summarize, I think it's important to sort of orient what are we here to do. To remind anyone that may be watching this for the first time, recently the Board of Trustees, following a lengthy presentation from staff, provided direction rather than to build a new elementary school in the Spanish Springs area, to direct staff to work with the Zoning Advisory Committee to rezone the elementary schools specifically for the 24-25 school year. So that's some of the background of how we got here tonight. In the same time, we want to look at the middle school enrollment balance as well. And then again, 24-25, this is an immediate need that we're looking to enact for next school year. So that's what we're here to work on, or why we're here. And this is just some more data and some more context. The top line, hard to read from afar, that is the total population of Washoe County since 2007 to 2022. The next highest line is the total enrollment of the Washoe County School District, and the lowest line there, 5,000-6,000 range, is the total births to Washoe County resident mothers as reported by the Washoe County Health Department. These are some of the statistics that, amongst many, that we take into consideration when we do our work, but I think it's just really, really interesting. I don't know if anybody else thinks it's as interesting as I do, that the enrollment of the Washoe County School District, not just Spanish Springs, but as a whole, is down 600 or so since this chart started in 2007, despite a population increase countywide of about 88,000 individuals. So just more data. This is an interesting map overlaid with known and pending developments. Always an important topic of discussion in this group, and an important variable in addition to births in the county, in migration into the county, these planned residential developments. So this map obviously has an aerial imagery on it. It also has the existing elementary school zone boundaries on it. And the shaded areas represent known, approved, pending, under construction residential developments. Take from this what you will. Obviously, some elementary school zones have no planned or under construction residential development projects in them. Some have many. The reason that we have maps like this is because we have very detailed information on all of the planned and under construction residential developments, including the timelines under which they intend to be developed. What we then do on our side, that's all information that's provided us from the City of Sparks and UNR and other sources. What we do is translate that into students. Nobody else does that. That's the school district's business. And that's what that table on the right really tries to illustrate, that this is an empirical projection based on the average per capita rates over the preceding 3 and 5 years of number of students per single family unit, which is the SF on that column, or the multi-family units. We develop these student generation rates regionally. North Spanish Springs is different than Old Sparks, is different than Southwest Reno. But generally, these are the rates for North Spanish Springs here. You can see, I think it's always grounding, or an important point to note that while many of us maybe may have children, or just there's sometimes a projected perception that if I have 3 children, school-age children, then everyone who's going to be living in that 100-unit development is also going to have 3 children. In fact, the actual numbers suggest that of a single-family residential development of 100 homes, that could be expected to create 18 elementary age students. That's the information that we then input into these projections to suggest the timing of these new homes and the amount of students that they're likely to generate. That's in addition, of course, to the main variable, which is just the existing students matriculating up through the system. Okay, so just again, more information. This is zooming in on the numbers a little bit in the Spanish Springs area. That top line is housing units, total residential developments which exist in the Spanish Springs area, in this area, the zones that we're talking about. Nearly 10,000 additional residential units in the last 9 years. Huge growth. No one's disputing that. Everyone sees and feels that. However, only about 500 additional students enrolled K through 8 versus the 14-15 school year. You can see a couple of those blips in there. Sky Ranch opens, 6th grades move up to middle school, elementary school enrollment goes down, middle school enrollment goes up. It's really that gray line with the numbers associated with it. That's the K-8 total. You can see it peaking just pre-COVID, dropping off significantly with the onset of COVID and the opening of the Pinecrest Charter School, a noteworthy development relevant to that area. Again, approximately 10,000 new homes in this area over the last 10 years, mere 500 additional students enrolled in Washoe County School District. Just data that helps provide context for what we're trying to do here. Okay. This is a new piece of info for the group. We didn't see this last month, but I think it's important to see to look back, right? Some of the history. So there's a ton of information on this slide. Obviously all the schools that are on the agenda, all the elementary schools, all the middle schools, and looking at that 14-15 to 18-19 period, you can see tremendous overcrowding in most of these schools. Noteworthy, many of them were over 700 and even some over 800 student enrollment throughout that time period. Also Spanish Springs Elementary School highlighted a couple of years there where they ran multi-track year-round sessions. Upon the opening of Sky Ranch in the 1920 school year, you see some changes, 6th graders moving up to middle school, relieving some of that overcrowding, and then in 2021 school year, opening of Bow Hatch, you can see big changes. We also note again the Pinecrest Charter School opening, and then going forward, we see some imbalances, underutilization, mild overcrowding, and really brings us to where we are today looking forward. I thought, this is pretty dense, but I think it's important when we start looking at, should we or should we not consider, 600 students in Beasley or Van Gorder going forward, whereas, in the past they were consistently over 700-800. Don't want to go there again, but sometimes we don't look into the past enough. So I thought this slide was valuable. Also a history lesson, enrollment boundaries. This slide has the pre-Sky Ranch and Bow Hatch enrollment boundaries for the elementary school in red, and the enrollment boundaries for the middle school is kind of in orange up there. Of note, Van Gorder historically went in its entirety to Shaw, and you can see on there also Van Gorder included all of that Wingfield Hills area that we're going to be talking about tonight. Also, historically, Beasley primarily went to Mendive, and Sepulveda, curiously, was split feeding to multiple middle schools back in the day, so many 5 years ago. That's what it used to look like. This is what it looks like today. New middle school, new elementary school. You can see Van Gorder and Beasley now go in their entirety to Sky Ranch, as does Bow Hatch and Sepulveda. You can see the coincident red and beige lines around those boundaries. No split feeding elementary to middle school feeders. So all of our elementary schools go in their entirety to a middle school. That's what it looks like now. And this is what the enrollments look like today and projected into the future. This is the same table that we showed last month, but really this is what we're here to work on. Okay, this is a new slide, an old new slide that I appreciate the reminder to include. It has been helpful at times in guiding our discussions through some challenging decisions. So I'll let you guys read that. This is an excerpt from the administrative regulation approved by the Board of Trustees, which suggests not only the composition of this committee, or well, it directs the composition of the committee, but it suggests that these might be critical pieces of guidance for you all to consider when making these challenging decisions of change. So before we dive into the meat of the presentation, any questions or comments?
Adam, I've got one. From the slide that showed the regional development, this shows there's 53 students projected. There's a little table on the right. Is that how we should perceive that, the total? So 53 students are projected to be entering from these new developments? No? How should I read that table?
Good question. The table is representative of a hypothetical 100 unit development, what it might generate. So 100
Okay.
single family units would generate 39 total K-12 students. An apartment complex of, for example, 200 units might be anticipated to create or generate 28 K-12 students.
Okay, so do you know from what is approved to develop what the volume of students you're projecting?
I do, but not off the top of my head.
Okay.
You know, this is to illustrate we're aware of these developments, we're aware of their composition, we're aware of their schedule, and all of that is included in our projection, as well as the associated student generation rate, and that is how we end up with these projection tables.
Great. So just to make clear, your projections forward include whatever numbers you're forecasting from those developments.
You betcha.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Adam, just to clarify on that, approved, pending, and under construction are all included. So obviously if it's stopped construction, you're not including those numbers. But if it's approved, it's pending, is that included as well? Because it's not approved, so.
Yeah, again, all of these have, you know, absorption schedules to them. A 500 unit development is going to take 5 years to construct and occupy. And so we
So you've scaled
move
that
that every year
Okay.
based on if it's still pending, it's not under construction. Okay, now they're building, we're keeping track of things. So, you know, it's constantly updated, but yes, all known developments are incorporated into our projection.
Thank you.
Adam, Darren Fleck. Could you explain, I don't think people understand the buildings of the new school and how a school like Sky Ranch could be at 94% and have a trailer, where Shaw and Mendive in the late 20-teens had upwards of 90%, 99% and had no trailers. And in understanding that value when it comes to enrollment percentage of capacity and why that may be different at a new school.
I'll give it a shot. I'll use this as an opportunity to reiterate that on these tables, the red column, additional temporary capacity, represents the potential classrooms or number of students that could be occupied in our portable classrooms. So you mentioned Sky Ranch up there with 100 in that column. That's to suggest that there are 2 portables composed of 2 classrooms each for a total of 4. Each classroom suggested to be able to hold 25 students. That is not included in addition to the base maximum capacity of 1418. So when you see the current enrollment of 1339 and that 94%, that's 1339 divided by 1418. That 100 additional temporary capacity is merely that. It's temporary and additional. You know, as to why certain schools have portables and certain schools don't, It is not a precise exercise. It does have to do with the special programs that may be occupied in a school and different student-teacher ratios of special ed programs or other special programs that, really require, additional classrooms or isolated classroom spaces. There's a few other, subtle variables that might play into it. Academic preference, principal wants and needs, availability of capital funding is something. These portables cost upwards of, several $100,000 to relocate and install. The newest ones, or most of the ones today, have, plumbing, water, and heat. I mean, these are equivalent classroom spaces to what exists inside the school. But it's a tool in the toolbox, and sometimes it's used well, and sometimes it's been used maybe excessively or wrongly in the past, and that's, something we're always trying to improve upon. All right, we'll dive into some options then. First couple are going to look familiar from last month. Exactly the same we talked about last month. Option 1, you can see the 3 main areas outlined with the red dash line and the arrows. We'll start kind of in the lower left. We're looking at sort of and I'm going to start to try to coin some nicknames just because it's easier for me, and maybe it will sink in for you guys. I'll try them out. If they're lame, you let me know. Come up with a better one. But that little Sparks Boulevard triangle, I don't have a good one for that. On the opposite side of Sparks Boulevard from Bohatch, option 1 suggests that it to be rezoned to Sepulveda. Moving counterclockwise, we've got the Wingfield Hills area on the opposite side of Vista Boulevard, moving from Bohatch to Van Gorder. And then while we're on Van Gorder, option 1 suggests that the entirety of Van Gorder be rezoned from Sky Ranch to Shaw. And then rounding option 1 out, we've got Small Stonebrook, we're calling it, as outlined there in red, moving from Bohatch today to Spanish Springs Elementary, and then continuing on with the rest of Spanish Springs Elementary to Shaw Middle School. So that's what it looks like today. This is what the after zoning map would look like. And we threw in the aerial zoom in of that Small Stonebrook boundary because it was a question last month. That's running along a major drainage way, kind of bisecting that Stonebrook development. So we feel like that's a reasonable, logical place to draw a boundary. But that's what the zoning map would look like for option 1. And this is what the projected enrollment impacts would look like for option 1. On the top, for everybody, on the top is the same current condition projections for these schools. On the bottom are the after conditions for these schools. That red line, that vertical red line, suggests that these impacts go into effect start of the 24-25 school year. And you can see the ups and downs, right? Bohatch, significantly relieved. Sepulveda, only a small increase in enrollment, a small change. Spanish Springs has plenty of capacity today to absorb Small Stonebrook going into them. Van Gorder has ample capacity, but definitely pushing quite a few more students into Van Gorder. Again, same option that we saw last month. In this one, with all of Van Gorder, the expanded Van Gorder moving to Shaw, as well as Small Stonebrook, you see Shaw enrollment increasing over 1,100, just slightly over its rated base capacity. So great relief to Sky Ranch to round this table out, but maybe not ideal for Shaw, so let's keep exploring options. Okay, base option 2, same as we saw last month. Same Sparks triangle from Bohatch to Sepulveda. Same move of Wingfield Hills from Bohatch to Van Gorder, but in option 2, Van Gorder stays in Sky Ranch instead of moving to Shaw. And in option 2, we expand the Stonebrook option to the large Stonebrook option, taking a greater number of residential units from Bohatch out of the Stonebrook development into Spanish Springs Elementary, and again also up into Shaw. Same exact option, same slides we saw last month. These are the after images, zoning boundaries, both elementary and middle, and the after enrollment impacts. So you can see some pluses and minuses at the elementary school level without Van Gorder moving en masse to Shaw. Shaw only sees an uptick as a result of the large Stonebrook move to Spanish Springs Elementary School, and conversely, Sky Ranch is not relieved quite to the degree that one might desire. Exact same info we saw last month. Now we're going to dive into some variations. We'll call this one 2B. We saved 2A for later. It looks a lot like 2. We've got the Sepulveda Sparks Boulevard triangle. But in this one, we're leaving the Van Gorder enrollment boundary alone. So you can see that Wingfield Hills area is suggested to stay in Bohatch, but we are moving Van Gorder to Shaw. So in option 1, we move Van Gorder to Shaw. That kind of overheated Shaw. So let's keep Van Gorder a little smaller and still move it to Shaw and see what that looks like. We're also going large Stonebrook to Spanish Springs. This is what the after map looks like. So hopefully my words match what that says. Stop me if you get lost, please. This is what the impact data looks like. So without moving that Wingfield Hills area out of Stonebrook into Van Gorder, out of Bohatch into Van Gorder, you can see Bohatch keeps a few more students, just over 90% of their base capacity, not over 100. Shaw, again, creeps up over 1,100 projected enrollment, but not quite as much as option 1 previously suggested. So moving in the right direction, some pluses and minuses to this one, some new variations for you guys to consider, but we've got a few more to go. Option 2C. So all just subtle variations on option 2. We've got that Sepulveda Sparks Boulevard triangle. We've got, what do we got going on here? We've got the Wingfield Hills area going back into Van Gorder, and we've got Van Gorder staying in Sky Ranch. But this was brought up last month, and we've had a number of conversations about it. We wanted to throw this in. There's a new apartment complex called Rowan Apartments, Golden Triangle Parkway off of Vista that I think warrants consideration for rezoning into Beasley. So that's what's depicted here in option 2C. Not a lot of students, but relatively equidistant, and I think, again, worth considering going to Beasley versus all the other options, send it to Van Gorder. And then, of course, we've got large Stonebrook going from Bohatch to Spanish Springs and up to Shaw. Okay, so this is what it looks like on a map. A little bit more detail on the left for the Golden Triangle. There's 2 access points on and off of Vista Boulevard for that large apartment complex. One is a right in, right out. There's a raised median on Vista right there. And one is a signalized intersection. This is all under construction. It won't be fully occupied for several more years, and ultimately is not projected to generate more than about 30 students, based on that student generation rate for multifamily units. It's a big development, but surprisingly small number of students that we project it will develop. Of course, that's plus or minus, but this is what the map looks like on option 2C. It's not a big change if you look at the projected enrollments, but in this scenario, again, Van Gorder stays in Sky Ranch, so Shaw doesn't receive as many additional students. Sky Ranch doesn't receive as much relief. The biggest variation or change on this one is several fewer students being rezoned into Van Gorder, which is a mild source of criticism from some of the other option 2 items, and Beasley would appear to readily have the capacity to receive those students. So just want to present you guys with all options possible. And also, maybe this is a good time to suggest, you know, this when I finally stop talking, this is a good opportunity and has been in the past for some newer members of the committee. You know, when we make the sausage, you know, if you like parts of 2B and you like parts of 2C and you ask us to come back next month with a 2D or whatever that turns into, like, there's a lot of different ways we could put these puzzle pieces together, and there's pros and cons with everyone, and we really never find a perfect one. It's about working together to come up with something that's optimal for everybody involved. So I just wanted to kind of encourage you guys to think like that rather than thinking more rigidly like it's option 2C or nothing. That's not the way we work here. Okay? So we're out of the 2s, we're into the 3s. Reserve the right to recall the option 2A. But this one is sort of a, we'll see how it lands. It's an exercise in what ifs. I don't know. We've got some of the same ones, same as option 2. So you've got the Sparks Boulevard, Sepulveda Triangle. You've got the Wingfield Hills to Van Gorder. You've got the large Stonebrook to Spanish Springs. But in this one, we're moving Beasley back to Mendive, wholesale. We're keeping Van Gorder in Sky Ranch, and it looks like this when we're done. You can see the large Stonebrook goes to Spanish Springs and then turns turquoise and goes to Shaw. But Beasley now matches the shade of Mendive in its entirety. Okay, so option 3, that's what it looks like on the enrollment projections, slide 27. All of the elementary school numbers are basically the same as what we've seen on the option 2 variations. Sky Ranch is relieved sufficiently. Shaw only receives the uptick associated with large Stonebrook, right, via Spanish Springs. And then Mendive receives the entirety of Beasley, which puts them up near 1,100 enrollment, which is right at or slightly above their rated maximum capacity.
Can I ask a question, Adam?
You bet.
Does that 1,076 projection 24-25 include the 200 variances that Mendive currently has?
It sure does. Yep. We'll talk about variances more, but essentially, you know, our variances basically inform our enrollments, which are then used as the base for projecting forward. Those students are anticipated to turn into 7th graders and 8th graders, regardless of whether they're zoned or attend on variance. So to the best of our ability, we've incorporated the historical all in and out variance trends at Mendive to develop these projections. So this is option 3, some pros, some cons, couple different twists on option 3. We'll look at option 3A. Again, we gotta sometimes show our work. You know, I don't like to dismiss options. I like to show them all to you, whether they look good on a map or the numbers work out or not. That's, I think, better if we show a large number of combinations. So option 3A, for the good of the order, all of some of our base moves, so to speak. I won't articulate them again, but this one takes all of Sepulveda to Mendive rather than Beasley. Beasley in option 3A stays in Sky Ranch. That's what it looks like on a map. And this is what it looks like on an enrollment projection. As you might imagine, the enrollment at Beasley is roughly equivalent to the enrollment at Sepulveda, so adding one or the other to Mendive has approximately the same impact. This is more of a preference or geography or neighborhood type of decision, but just wanted to show our work again. So option A, or 3A, there's got to be an option 3B. Let's do them both. Same base moves. Again, it might not be perfect, but we're trying to work this out. For the good of the order, what if we move all of Sepulveda and all of Beasley into Mendive, and that's what it looks like on a map. Getting a little well, that's what it looks like on a map. This is what it looks like numbers-wise. So no surprise there. Both schools won't fit in Mendive, and that under-enrolls Sky Ranch a little bit. We left that one for last just to show our work. So a few more contextual slides that I thought were valuable, and then we'll try to wrap this up. This is a slide that tries to demonstrate the vertical matriculation alignments. Hopefully that makes sense. And as I opened with, we've got all of our elementary schools feeding in their entirety to middle schools. We feel, well, and you can see that Sky Ranch, all of the students at Shaw attend Spanish Springs, but some of the students at Sky Ranch attend Reed and some attend Spanish Springs. You can follow the red lines. All of Sepulveda and all of Beasley attend Reed after attending Sky Ranch, with all of Bohatch and all of Van Gorder. That's the way it exists today. So I thought it was a noteworthy point to suggest, like, this isn't good or bad, but we've had conversations about this in the past, that having sort of a partner, so to speak, Sepulveda and Beasley, if you got to split, let's split with some more friends. If it's just one of you, you know, if Bohatch, Van Gorder, Sepulveda, Beasley are going to Sky Ranch and just Beasley is the sole splitter out to Reed, that's arguably not as desirable as at least having some more peers from your middle school to your high school. It's much more difficult to get all of our middle schools to single feed to high schools. Some of it's by virtue of their population, but mostly it's their geography. So Sky Ranch is almost equidistant between Spanish Springs High and Reed High, and likely will always send some kids to both high schools, and that's the case at several of our middle schools today.
Adam, can we just add, I just want to make sure, so for, on the flip side of this, for Reed, they have 3 middle schools going into Reed, is that correct? So we have Mendive, we have one school from, so Catherine Dunn goes to Dilworth and then to Reed?
Yep.
And then Sky Ranch. So Reed is pulling kids from 3 middle schools, though.
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay.
But for everybody on the agenda tonight, this is what the lay of the land looks like today.
Right. Thank you.
So these are some additional considerations, some important topics that have been discussed in the past, and we really couldn't come up with, you know, I didn't want to generate 10 slides on each of these, but these are relevant variables to consider. So the variances was brought up previously. We do track those variances. We do utilize them in our projections, and trends from one school to a next inform our projections. And according to our updated variance policy, one of the elements suggests that schools that have their enrollment boundaries impacted as a result of actions of the board will not be eligible to receive or accept new variances for the one school year that they're affected. So for example, this school year, Jaywood Raw, Nicolakidis, Brown Elementary, Double Diamond Elementary all saw their enrollment boundaries change this school year as a result of the action of the committee and the board and the opening of the Jaywood Raw. So variances were not accepted into those schools for this year and this year only. Should we act in this way, any and all elementaries and middles affected for next school year would not be eligible to accept new variances for that one school year.
Are siblings grandfathered in if they already have a variance on an older child?
Not certain.
Okay.
I don't want to answer. I don't want to guess.
So essentially, we would be kind of having a domino effect with the variance then, because, for example, Dilworth receives Mendive receives many students from the Catherine Den area that are zoned for Dilworth to go to Mendive. So then if we were to change the boundaries, Mendive could no longer accept those variances, and those students would end up coming back to Dilworth, correct?
So all existing variances would be honored. No new variances would be allowed to be accepted for that one school year.
Okay. And then just as a comment, this morning in an operations meeting, there was some information given that there's going to be some changes updating the registration policy as well as some of the stuff with variances, and that information wasn't going to come out till later. So just so those of us that are on the board know, I think that there's probably maybe some more information to come regarding that may also then affect us and our decisions with this as well.
Okay, so a couple more key points on there. A huge amount of effort and energy and resources go into our special programs, of which there are many and many acronyms. We make some base assumptions based on regional and district-wide averages of the number of special programs in each school and reserve that capacity, sort of extract it from our projected availability. But then we try to go on a school-by-school basis and understand the special programs that do exist in each school. This is maybe the most difficult impact, space utilization impact for us to manage and measure and project in our schools, but we do try very hard in collaboration with our site administrators and with our special ed administrators and of course our capital projects team. But it is, I wanted to make note of it because it is incorporated into our enrollment projections and capacities to the best of our ability. A note about portables, we kind of talked about that previously. It is a tool in our toolbox, but generally speaking, it is not one that I think should be used as a part of our decision-making process. You know, I would caution against rezoning a school into a mildly overcrowded situation such that we would need to utilize the portable classrooms. But yeah, I just wanted to make note of that because it's a important variable in this story. And then GT, gifted and talented programs exist primarily at Sky Ranch. This is a gifted and talented program enrolled at approximately 100 students at Sky Ranch. Previously, prior to Sky Ranch, was located at Mendive. And just like all of our special programs, not impacted by our enrollment boundaries. This is a magnet program, and the location of those programs can and does change really at the discretion of staff, not even an action of the board. But at 100 students is certainly a material variable, by far a larger impact than any of these other special programs. So wanted to make note of that. Couple slides on variances. Y'all can really squint at those, but I'll tease out Beasley and Mendive of note, having above averagely large percentages and total numbers of variances in for differing reasons. It's, again, I think most important to note that, you know, we know how many students attend Beasley. We know how many have historically attended Beasley. We know how many third graders at Beasley historically turn into fourth graders, a matriculation coefficient. And so that is the mechanism through which we incorporate those variances. Some of these, it's noteworthy, there's a net in delta versus a net out on some of them. And I'll leave it to you all to, you know, speculate and draw conclusions there. It's interesting to look at the total number of students who live within the Bohatch zone versus how many are enrolled. I think those were the highlights I wanted to mention. Of course, the averages highlighted in, you know, red and orange. Those are averages across just those schools. I think these averages are representative of district-wide averages. I don't know if that's surprising to anyone to note that there's in excess of 10% of the student body is attending on variance at most of our schools across the district. And this is historical averages prior to this school year. No, this
Adam,
is
is
current.
the
The next slide's this is this year, sorry.
that was my next question, because the variance policy changed this year. Is
Yep.
that right?
Yeah.
And so you're saying basically no change overall, 11%?
Not a lot, yeah, so maybe we should have put these in the different order. Slide 37 is, the 4 school years preceding this school year, or 3 school years preceding. And then slide 36 is this year. So some changes,
Oh, okay.
but not as significant as one might believe. But still, regardless, I think there are some takeaways that I tried to highlight in this data. And also, again, to emphasize that this data is very much known to us and very much taken into consideration when we develop our projections. So we can certainly come back to those slides, but without further ado, I wanted to talk about option 2A. Almost done, you guys. Option 2, base option 2, right? We've got the Sparks Sepulveda move. We've got the entirety of the Wingfield Hills back to Van Gorder move. Van Gorder stays in Sky Ranch in this option. We've got Big Stonebrook, Large Stonebrook up to Spanish Springs. So we've seen this one before, and this is what the after map looks like. We've also seen this map before, but the twist on option 2A is that without moving any other enrollment boundary lines, we're suggesting moving the gifted and talented program of approximately 100 middle school students from Sky Ranch to Mendive. So as you recall, keeping Van Gorder in Sky Ranch previously left Sky Ranch a bit more enrolled than desired. Moving that program from Sky Ranch to Mendive results in these numbers. And you can see maybe a better balance between Mendive and Sky Ranch in this option. No option's perfect. No option is without change, but we've been directed to work hard to try and find some optimal change. This is a summary slide because nobody can remember everything that I just said. I don't know if this summarizes it in an effective way. In the past, we've found it helpful to put our suggestion or our recommendation out there, but that's all the content that I have, and I'd like to turn the floor back over to everybody to discuss your reactions. Thank you.
Hey Adam, Polly Boardman for the record. We had a public comment that came in on email regarding the Stonebrook, I think, property tax for a new school, and my assumption is that was for the Sky Ranch, the Stonebrook site that we're not building, and it probably is for the neighborhood to build a school or have that commitment to build a school. There's no requirement for someone to stay in a new school if they're moving into a neighborhood where they have that new house tax, right? It doesn't matter which school they would go to, since we're not focusing on building a Stonebrook school at the time.
No, I mean, the property tax in Washoe County is a function of the age of the home and the value of the property, and it's divvied up amongst the jurisdictions. Washoe County School District receives a portion of that, but there's not a regional string attached. I mean, that revenue can only be used for, capital facility needs, but it's not geographically specific.
I think we have quite a lot of public comment and I know a few people needed to leave, so if you all don't mind holding our discussion so we can hear some public comment. Kelly, do you want to? And if anybody is here and would like to comment after seeing the presentation, you can just grab a card and fill it out. You just need to put your first name and item 2.02 while the first person's going. Kelly?
Pablo Navaduran.
Hi, Pablo. Thank you for
Hello.
being here today.
Hello, I don't live here, but some of my friends do live in the Spanish speaking area, so I do support option 2A. I would very happily recommend movies Chi from Skyride to Midnight. Highly recommend. And then rezone all those some larger stone book area to Shaw Middle School. If we're in a med school, we're graduate, we might build a new med school in 5 years. Here we go, new book at med school. But yep, and then also I like option 2A, keep it option, but I'm here. I want to let the community know, like I feel like you need more schedule meeting in November in Spanish Spring area, Sky Ranch Shaw or midnight, maybe November, December to meeting Spanish Spring High School and Reed High School. But for me, I do support option 2A, but at done to midnight to see how a woman work for midnight, what the woman protection on midnight. And then I know we talked about FIP on combined with Trainer and Spark Middle School, but the possibility we could combine with Trainer, Spark, and Dilworth Middle School into one huge middle school that's on FIP. So just in case. So if done were rezoned to midnight, then that'll eliminate Spitfire for a Dilworth Middle School. That means they mostly go to Spark High School as well. And then possibly could combine with all three to one huge middle school. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Hartshorn.
For the record, my name is Dave Hartshorn. I've been a teacher at Menai Middle School from 2001 to 2008. Administrator from 2012 to present, so I'm pretty much bleeding purple in the Mendive community. I do want to thank Mr. Searcy, all of you for your work on the rezoning committee. No easy lift, but it's really valued and appreciated, so thank you. Little background, I'm sorry some of this has been repeated from Mr. Searcy's presentation, but all years leading up to Sky Ranch, we've had about 1,020 to 1,040 kids at Mendive Middle School with no mobiles. We had Beasley, half of Sepulveda, and the GT program. And just in reference, 2017 to 2018, and then 18 to 19, those are 2 years before Sky Ranch Middle School, we were on average about 1,047. We housed them perfectly, and there was no mobiles. When Sky Ranch opened, we consistently went down. It was just a trend going down, obviously. We did lose Beasley. We lost the GT program. We hovered about 750 to 800 kids. That's without variances. I had to take variances. I value electives. I value my staff. And in order to keep my staff in my teaming model and my electives, which, by the way, electives is what keeps a lot of kids involved in school. A lot of kids don't value or don't care about their core subjects, unfortunately, but their electives is what keeps them walking through that door and with a smile on their face. So I really value electives, and as your numbers go down, you lose elective choices. I had to take a lot of variances the last few years to hold the teaming model, staffing electives again. Every year I'm taking about 100 to 180 variances at Mendive Middle School to keep, again, the teaming models, all of our electives. I did have to drop Spanish, unfortunately, which still gives me indigestion to this day. Such an important elective, and I had to cut that elective as well as Shaw because of the numbers. This year I have 890 kids as of today, 899 kids as of today, and 188 are on a variance. That's 20% of our population is on a variance. Majority of those are from Dilworth Middle School. Working with Dilworth Middle School and the administration over there, it can be struggling when you use a lot of kids. It can affect their electives as well. And working with the principal over there, it doesn't just affect us; it affects them as well. I have 316 sixth graders this year. Again, it's important to know 316 sixth graders, but 64 on a variance. That brings us down to 252 if I did not take any variances. And that's a trend we're having, 252, 52, 252, which would put me at about 700s if I didn't bring variances in. Moving forward, am I done?
Yeah, sorry.
Dang. Sorry. Anyways, thank you very much.
Well, Tyler and I would love to chat a little bit more and maybe set up a parent meeting with your school if that would be okay with you. So we'll be in touch with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There's no more public comment.
Okay. Anybody else? Last chance before we start discussing. We'll give you another chance after we discuss if you have questions. How about that? This is a nuanced thing, so we want to make sure that the public and everybody has an opportunity. Okay. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'd like to thank Adam and his team for bringing all these options. I really appreciate having more choice here. I also appreciate the enhancements to the maps, seeing where student concentrations are, and on the tables where historically we've really seen overcapacity, not so much undercapacity, but that's also instructive as we're trying to strike a balance. So just thank you for all the work you've put into it.
Go ahead, Darren.
I also appreciate the work that goes into this, and Adam and his team are like playing the gambling game of watching these numbers. And my only fear with keeping anything in that middle area, Bow Hatch and Sky Ranch, near capacity, is that what we're doing to the community, what we've already done, is we end up with an accordion, right? We took all these kids out of Shaw, Mendive, Spanish Springs Elementary, and we shoved them into the middle, knowing that that complete area was nothing but dirt being developed. And now it's full again. And so we're going to pull them out, and heaven forbid, right? Like, this is not Adam, this is not his team, this is the beauty of social science, right? What if those numbers bite us in the tail again? And what we have to do is go back into those same neighborhoods and pull kids back out and put them into developed areas that had been stable. And I would say that, in my opinion, of just 2 cents, that if you're going to rank where schools should have room, I would say number 1, Sky Ranch should probably end up with the smallest percentage to capacity. Shaw followed by that, and then Mendive. If you go back to some sort of boundaries that it's pretty locked in when it comes to development, then we're not, when new kids come in, we're pushing them into open areas and not pushing them into filled areas and then having to yank them back out after we've already spent money moving portables around. And I think that's an approach that would seem sane going forward in leaving room where most of that green on the map is, because I believe most of that green on the map is inside that window between La Posada, Pyramid, Van Gorder's border, and there. And that's just philosophy, what I'm thinking going forward.
So if I could, just to try to translate what you're describing, which I appreciate and I think I understand might be represented best perhaps by option 3. It relieves Bow Hatch and Sky Ranch as much as any option and leave Shaw with ample room for enrollment variation. Not perfect, but I think best represents what you're describing.
I have a question about the variances at Mendive. I'm curious, out of the 180 that they have in the 3 grade levels, how many of those students are in the done zone? Because I do, well, it's not on the agenda, and so we're not actually making zoning changes for, I'm not saying that we're making a zoning change for Catherine Dunn. I think that a potential future impact with Catherine Dunn being that it seems that we're hearing that a majority of those variances are coming from Catherine Dunn. And so I would love to know how many are currently living in that Catherine Dunn zone of the 180 variances going to Mendive, because that's impacting Mendive and their numbers, but it's also impacting Dilworth, which, as we know, we're looking at some potential significant changes in the next, 5 to 10 years in the Sparks area as well. So, I'm not suggesting we add a random change, because we did not notify Catherine Dunn that. So be clear. I'm just curious what percentage of that is Catherine Dunn. The other thing that I am curious about, in any of the situations, we are still seeing Shaw in the 60s and 70% outside of overcrowding them by having Van Gorder go there. And as we've heard from now multiple principals at the middle school level, we have multiple middle school teachers sitting at this, former and current. We know that there is an optimal level for a middle school in order to have these vital electives for our students. And none of these gives Shaw the opportunity to offer its students enough allocations. I mean, they won't get enough allocations in any of these options unless we overfill them. So we may need to play a little alphabet game in order to do that, perhaps. But every one of them I see, Shaw still has 60 to 70% range, and they're not going to solve the problem of their teachers are teaching 3 preps because they're having to teach electives. So, and that's what we're hearing from the principal and the teachers, that it's really, really tough on their school. So those are my 2 areas that I'd love to see us play around with a little alphabet game on that, and then getting some more information about those variances at Mendive.
Lauren Rushing. We mentioned last meeting that there were some individuals or neighborhoods that had already been rezoned before. Can we identify which ones those are as well that would be moving again?
Yeah, appreciate you highlighting that. There are some students in the Wingfield Hills area that's suggested in multiple options to be rezoned into Van Gorder, in the Stonebrook options to be rezoned into Spanish Springs, and the areas suggested to be zoned from Bohatch into Sepulveda, who would potentially be rezoned back in, like they went to kindergarten at Spanish Springs Elementary, then they got rezoned into Bohatch in 1st grade, and now they're going to be 5th graders next year, and they're being rezoned back again. We talked about that last meeting, and the intention would be to create a motion to sort of carve them out and provide them a guaranteed variance, which they're entitled to without transportation, but the suggestion would be to provide them transportation and a guaranteed variance if they want to stay. It's only elementary schools and only at Bohatch. If they want to stay for that 5th grade we'll do right by them rather than rezoning them twice in their elementary school career. I forget the numbers. It's like 24 total, something like that, but it is a possibility.
Adam, can you put that into the slides the next time to sort of document what that proposal is? It could be good for the public to have that on record.
Will do.
Thank you. One follow-up question on the GT move. Is there a discussion that's been had about moving GT from Sky Ranch to Mendive within staff, or like what is the logic for that move other than to get kids out of Sky Ranch? Is there anything else behind moving GT?
We have discussed it amongst staff. The conversations I've been in, it's favorably received. Mendive is, of course, previously and for many years housed that program, so they're familiar with it. Certainly, they have the capacity, also physically, to house that program, and some conversations have suggested that Mendive is a little more physically accessible. You know, it's more centrally located to the region. This is a regional magnet program, so makes it maybe a little bit more accessible to students that live in different areas than Sky Ranch is just a little bit further out. But, you know, what's driving this primarily is the enrollment balance exercise that we're going through here now. I think it's favorably received. It does impact those families, you know, so it is change. But yeah, that's pretty much the summary of the discussions we've had.
So following on to that, if moving special programs isn't in our purview and that becomes our recommendation to the board, and if the board goes with that, like what is the process if it's not up to us or the board, but that's what we would like to do? What could go? Like, is it, there's no guarantees that it would happen even if that's our recommendation in the boards, right?
So we've done, you know, actions like this in the past. Moving sixth graders from elementary to middle school was the most common one where, hey, we showed enrollment projections that included that assumption, but technically that was just a part of your recommended motion. So to say that there's no guarantees, I think is fair, right? The board has significant discretion, but your recommendations carry a tremendous amount of weight. And so, you know, should the board accept or approve your recommendation as written, then, you know, staff would enact the program relocation as suggested or as recommended. And then that's an annual sort of application process through that GT program to the eligible students and families, and it would just include a different location. There's a little more to it than that, but I think that's how it would play out.
Melissa Cook, Sanford. Has it not been discussed to potentially look at Shaw as an option for the GT program?
Not that I've been a part of, no. Probably runs counter to some of the points I made earlier about why Mendive would be a good option, but I could say off the cuff that, you know, based on enrollments and capacities, that it would probably fit. I could explore that option on paper next meeting if the group's interested. It's obviously a bit further north, but on paper it might work well.
Yeah, could we combine that with option 3, which gives Mendive more students without moving GT, and then take the GT over to Shaw and see if it makes that difference for getting electives for both?
So I think something that we need to make sure that everybody understands is there's no transportation provided for the program, meaning that any parent in the entire region that wanted to take their child to that program would have to drive them there. And so if we are going to recommend that they're going to drive to Shaw and then have to go to work as well. I mean, this is something that we've discussed with North Valleys. We've discussed it with several other areas. And one of I mean, Pyramid Highway is not the most traffic friendly area in our region. So while that would solve the Shaw thing, I think we're actually increasing a barrier to anybody who doesn't have flexibility to drive their children all the way out to Shaw. So I'm with you. I want to find a way to give Shaw more allocations and more opportunities, but that feels like we're really limiting who would be able to go to GT. It really would only be students who currently live in Spanish Springs, I think. And so that would be highly limiting, and I think that would be an equity issue.
Potentially, but you could also have families that have high schoolers going to Spanish Springs and could take their siblings, right? So there's that factor too. Those schools are close to each other.
I mean, yeah, but then what about the kids who live near Sparks High, or the kids who live near Dilworth or Sparks Middle School? How are they getting there?
I think there are other GT programs. I'm not 100% sure, but
Not
I
in
thought we were
Sparks.
just talking about for these 7 elementaries. Like,
It's
where
the
did their...
it is the only one in Sparks.
Gotcha.
There's
Okay.
Clayton, Pine, and Swope.
Okay, thank you.
None of those are the most convenient locations for Sparks residents, I would assume. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think not only are they not convenient, but I believe, at least from when my kids were doing it, you had to go to the one that was closest to where you were. So we were in Spanish Springs, so we were zoned to go to the magnet program at Mendive at that time. I think it would have to be kind of a variance issue again if you wanted to go to Clayton or to Swope.
And I'm not sure that there's a solution for the Shaw thing that I brought up, because if we move Van Gorder, then it overfills it. And we don't want that either. I don't know that there is a solution. I just wanted to bring up that it was brought to our attention by the principal and some public comment. And so I just want to make sure that we're addressing that. And we do want to, just like we've addressed in North Valleys, we do understand that traffic concerns in this area. And I know that you guys have really looked at the left turns onto Pyramid, and that has all been in consideration. So we do want to just make sure that anybody watching this or looking at these understands that Adam's team does take that into account, that turning left onto Pyramid isn't always the easiest thing to do. So.
Adam, Tyler Rogers for the record. I like 2A on the surface. I think it gets a lot of the balance that we historically seek. But I will echo Chair Hull that we've heard from both principals that they're looking for sort of more students so they can offer that both at Mendive and I think at Shaw. So I'm curious to explore something in the realm of 2A that could get some more students into Shaw, and that is not as much as moving all of Van Gorder to Shaw, because that seems maybe not as much as we need, but I am receptive to what the principals are sharing with us. We've also heard in public comment the 26, and I think the folks can confirm for me that are more familiar with the area, but I think we heard in public comment that the bottom little 26 K to fourth graders, there was concern of moving that neighborhood. And to me, that 26, I'm curious why you sort of left that in, because it seems not as necessary. And if there's concern from the public specific on that, why leave that in? So I'm sort of curious with a variant of 2A, 2C, or I forget where we are on all of the, on our numbering, but I'm curious to sort of see that, like, remove that population from the bottom from moving and see if we can move something more into Shaw.
I'm not sure that the public comment that we received via email was actually about that particular neighborhood. I think it was a little further. I think it was the fourth one that was attached. And I think it was actually something a little bit more on Sparks Boulevard and it was the concern about going to Mendive, and that was a very long distance versus going to Bohatch. I thought that was the one. Maybe
Here's
not.
the long email.
Maybe I need to go reread them.
It's
Is
that
it?
little
Okay.
pocket, and they said, elementary would be inconvenient, but please at least keep us at the same middle school, at the
Okay.
very least, yeah.
Okay. That might have been what I was reading, was that at least keep us at the middle school. Okay.
I just want to highlight that's Sparks Boulevard, that they're on the opposite side of Sparks Boulevard. So that's what's driving the suggestion as much as anything. I mean, obviously 26 elementary school students isn't going to make or break anything, but we want to relieve overcrowding at Bohatch. That's our primary objective, really. So it stays in terms of recommendations until you guys tell me to take it out. But Sepulveda matriculates to Sky Ranch and likely will remain so.
Yeah.
I do like Melissa Cook for the record. In option 2C, the idea about the apartments that are being built on Sparks Boulevard, currently heading up the hill to Beasley, I think that might be a little bit easier than them having to go all the way out to Bohatch at that point. That seems to make a little bit more sense. But I did have a question about kind of that pocket of, seems pretty populated, that's just east of the Red Hawk Golf Course but north of Golden Eagle. And I'm not. Yes, right there. I know that the road kind of curves there, but I'm just kind of trying to understand like why the boundary line there. And for those families to have to travel from basically right around the corner from Golden Eagle all the way like around to the Spanish Springs Elementary School, if we could see what it would look like to have that pocket into Van Gorder.
I can say, because I live right there, and I was, I went to the zoning meetings in, I think it was 2008, because at that time, I passed Van Gorder to take my kids to school. But now there is Hubble Boulevard, which goes directly out to Sepulveda. So it's almost faster to do that than to get to Van Gorder at this point, depending on the time of day. Or it's at least kind of, it's not equidistant, but it takes about the same amount of time. Or not, sorry, Spanish Springs, not Sepulveda. Spanish Springs and Van Gorder.
I think the committee should know also that on the record that we are going to meet some of the principals
Yes.
at these schools. So those are scheduled for next week. So we're going to get additional information, and those communities want to engage with us. So I think the committee should have that information because this is for possible action.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the rest of Mr. Hartshorn's statement.
It doesn't feel like we're feeling action tonight. So I guess that sort of, Adam, do you need more clarity from us to come back in a month with refined options?
I've got a couple additional ideas from you tonight. I appreciate the discussion, both for some new variants and some additional clarifying information on some of the existing options. I wanted to piggyback on your comment about reaching out to the individual principals to make a commitment from me to ensuring that our November meeting is able to be hosted in one of these schools. We're targeting Sky Ranch Middle School. It's an administrative hiccup that I'm responsible for, and I feel like it's important. I've heard everyone loud and clear and want to make sure that that happens next month, in addition to any individual outreach that you guys have to the community. So, no, I don't have any additional questions for the committee. Thank you.
Okay, any other thoughts, things that information you want before the next meeting from Adam and his team?
Would it be possible to get kind of the breakdown of what that GT population does look like where are they coming from? What would be their zone schools?
Yeah, I have quite a bit of data on that and had already noted to include some degree of granularity on that for next meeting. You bet. And
Okay.
we'll probably illustrate what an option that you suggested looked like, and we can discuss the pros and cons of it.
And just also a comment is if we could, being at a middle school currently that is really struggling with being able to offer elective choices due to lowered numbers, I do think it's the teaming. For example, my school is no longer able to do. We no longer have the amount of electives offered either. So knowing that I'm dealing with that at a very small school, I can imagine that, and I do know that Shaw and all of my neighboring middle schools in the Sparks area we've all lost allocations and options. And so the more we can balance, the better it would be for all of the middle schools, not just Mendive or Shaw, but for all of our middle schools, in fact.
And Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, elective-wise, the GT program comes with an elective allocation? Because they don't come with teachers. You get 100 kids and their teachers need prep time, so they go into your electives that are already bursting at the seams because you don't have them, right? So I'm just thinking, and also if we could get clarification from staff regarding, I know that the GT move is an administrative issue, not a zoning issue. That would not keep Mendive or any school from getting variances, correct? Because that would not be a zoning move. Because if you were to rezone any school and you put that stop on the variances for a year, for example, at Mendive, you would drop by 60 instantly because of the lack of sixth graders coming in. The vacuum we have here is the vacuum of Dilworth losing kids, which also is a Title I issue. We have 20% of our population at Mendive who come from a Title I community that gets extra resources to help, that then goes to a school that's caught in the middle. It's not a new school that has all the bells and whistles, and it's not a Title I school that has extra resources. And so what it does help us, it helps us save jobs, it helps us offer electives to kids by keeping that. But what it does to Ms. Cook's school at Dilworth is it drains it dry and leaves the kids with fewer options because they don't have electives. Because now they're being sucked here and it's all going to the middle, which creates the fear of we're still funneling to a school that's overcrowded. And on every single one of these maps, it's those two schools, Bohatch and Sky Ranch, that are surrounded by more development. And if we can push back to keep schools at a sustainable level and allow for the growth to go into the places that we know the growth is going to come from, then we wouldn't have to come back in a couple years. But I think a couple of those issues are big, because if you move GT into a place like Mendive or even Shaw, if it does, and this is just me trying to pull from what I think I've heard before, you get an elective teacher. If you get an elective teacher and then you were to lose 60 kids from not having variances, the result of that would be we would lose 2 teachers and get 1 in replacement. So we still would not have Spanish at Mendive.
So Darren, if we were today, if we were to go with option 2A, it does not actually change any boundaries for Mendive. So I think what you're asking is, would the variance policy be in effect for Mendive, especially for the 6th graders for next year if only GT moved? And so that would be something we could get some clarification for next meeting. Just based on the basic regulations of it, it doesn't seem like it's a boundary move, so it wouldn't. But let's make sure that we have, we'll just make sure that we get information about that.
Yes.
Because
and-
that impacts the school because they are taking so many variances.
Right.
Yes.
And if there were to be any movements in push down into Sparks, that would limit 60 a year.
Right.
We'd lose 60 6th graders next year, have 120 variances, then 60 7th graders the following year, and then the third year it
Right,
would be a
right.
full. But that goes more to, I think Shaw is Shaw's the biggest issue. Mendive can always get kids from Dilworth, Sparks Middle, and try to keep numbers, though, and I brought this up before, Mendive and Shaw right now have the same number of kids as Sky Ranch, and they have no opportunity to get a Spanish credit going into high school,
Right.
right? So you have a middle school where you have 1,300 kids that have a chance to get a Spanish credit, and you have 2 middle schools where the kids don't have a chance to get a Spanish credit, and at Shaw, you don't have foods, you don't have art, and you don't have Spanish. And I had, just anecdotally, people calling me from Stony Brook saying, hey, so if my kid does go to Shaw, they can't take Spanish. I go, well, it just depends on how many kids go there, right? And that's
Right.
that's a big deal. It's a high school credit you can get.
Yeah, and I do see that Shaw has 121 variances out, and I wonder if some of those variances are because students can't get those special electives, and so people are choosing to leave the school for that reason. So that's something to, for the district to mull over, is that you've got students leaving, and that's not something that we have no purview over that. So, okay, I think we've hit a point.
yeah.
Yep, nope, that's
No,
okay.
I think
Yes,
Mia wanted to
please,
go.
please.
Adam, is it possible for us to get an option not using the 26 K through 4?
Sure, we can cook that up.
And I'd like to withdraw my idea for GT at Shaw, because if there's only one GT program in Sparks, Mendive, I think, is the most convenient option for most families.
I was going to piggyback, just if we're thinking about central location about that, with both Mendive kind of sort of under numbers, right? But Dilworth and Sparks Middle School are somewhat centrally located and are very low on numbers. So that could be an option as well.
All right. And that would be the admin team looking into that and kind of giving us some thoughts on that. So we'll get that next time. So,
I just have one question
Yep.
to clarify with Darren. So just so I'm clear of the message you're sending is that you think Mendive should get more kids?
I think the Mendive and Dilworth community, if properly zoned, create a cap that will not need to be revisited, leaving room for growth at Bohatch and Sky Ranch. And I think that's where all the gaps are right here. And I mean, like I said earlier, the numbers are the numbers that these guys have to put together and use. And it's nothing they're doing. They're using the same numbers, whether they're right, say down at Jaywood Raw and it opens up right where it should be, or it's crazy off like at Bohatch and Polakitas.
Go
right?
us.
So, I mean, but
I
That's
know.
what
Wait, did we have a moment of celebration that we did that? We
I
did
wanted
that
to throw
spot
that
on?
bone.
Anybody?
But if we're gonna err, why don't we err where the possibility for growth actually exists and refill a community? And I think Adam's exactly right. Moving any of Sepulveda down back is not correct. But at the same time, if you push back some of the original boundaries to 2018 with GT anywhere and with Beasley down, you help Dilworth, you get money where it needs to be, and you create a neighborhood that's already settled so that you're not coming back in later and peeling back Beasley in 3 years, should, hopefully not, right? Should there be an issue, which this area out here has been the biggest headache for these guys. I mean, right before 2015 at Mendive, they had engineers out checking for how we were going to add on to Mendive. And then all of a sudden we weren't, and then, oh no, we got to build Sky Ranch, and of course the money issue, which was all wrapped up within all of that. So if we have a settled neighborhood that fills schools, then we can deal with all that out there as it comes, and there's space to put the kids without moving the checkerboard around.
Can I ask why Shannon Coley?
Turn your mic on.
Why you think you said not to move Sepulveda? Is that what I heard you say? And why? I'm thinking if you want to get from the periphery down, right, everything around the outside down, because all of this is going to be growing, correct? The higher. So why wouldn't you want to pull Sepulveda and Beasley down?
I don't think it will fit. We had half a Sepulveda before Sky Ranch opened. We had half a Sepulveda, all of Beasley, and the GT program, and we fit. And the question I was alluding to earlier with Adam, with a place like Sky Ranch, why did it get a mobile when it was right about 90% capacity in the second year when it opened? Because I about fell over when my daughter said she went into a mobile for her Spanish class the second year. And I taught across the hall from Gina Leonard, who was the principal there. And essentially, in some of these new schools, they're very cool spaces. But if you go to Mendive, there's not a lot of spaces that aren't walled off classrooms. Now we have dividers and stuff, right? And so the new method and new engineering of schools is to have these hub spaces that are open and you can get big groups there. Well, that adds to capacity, if I'm not wrong, and you can't use that space for a classroom. So, Sky Ranch, who was well under 100%, needed extra classrooms, partly because of special programs like GT, who might average 10 kids in a classroom as opposed to 35 in a normal classroom. And I think that's part of the problem with some of the new schools. The design method is I don't think the numbers are fair. You can put 95% at Mendive. We had it before Shaw opened with over 100%, not a single trailer. Now, it took some shuffling of teachers on carts, but the schools are built to house students in rooms. And I don't think the numbers are fair in some of these for the new schools because not all the spaces are usable as classrooms. And that's why I think the numbers can be a little deceiving when you say, oh my gosh, Mendive or Shaw would be nearer 95%. We've been at 95% and never had a trailer. Sky Ranch got to 90% and had to have a mobile put in.
Maybe some additional discussion on that would be helpful. So option 3 suggests moving Beasley back to Mendive. I say back, right, because they were prior to 2018, 2019, all in Mendive. We look at the enrollment impacts of that. It looks the same pretty much at all the elementary schools that we've seen before. puts 1,100 kids for a year or two in Mendive, arguably that's we're doing right by Mendive there. We're not moving the GT program in this scenario, but you see Shaw and Sky Ranch. It maybe doesn't do as much for Shaw as we'd like to, and I'm sitting here while you guys are talking, I'm listening, but I'm scratching my head on how we could get more students up into Shaw. Not coming up with any solutions, but I at least wanted to highlight option 3, trying to do that. And, I want to hear some emotional local reactions to Beasley to Mendive. Do you want to hear more about that? I kind of assume that Sepulveda to Mendive, and of course Beasley and Sepulveda to Mendive are not dead on arrival, but Beasley back to Mendive feels like it has merit, and sometimes these things are imperfect and win the day for other reasons than spreadsheets.
So my biggest hesitation on that is when you showed the vertical matriculation, is that then Sepulveda is the only school that goes to Sky Ranch that then goes to Reed. And so then you've got a situation where Reed has one entire middle school, but then they have 2 middle schools that have one single elementary school feeder at them. And that to me feels against the work that this committee and this district has done to create those really clear vertical lines. And I agree with you on the idea of kind of the buddy school system, right? So at least when both Sepulveda and Beasley are at Sky Ranch, you've got a good chunk of students that are going to 2 high schools. And so when it comes time to prepare 8th graders, you've got, these are our Reed kids and these are our Spanish Springs kids, and there's a good chunk of them. Whereas if you've only got one school going there, you're looking at what, 100, 200 kids, or I don't know, you're looking at a much smaller group, and then the whole rest of their school is like, oh yeah, we're all going to go over there. And I don't know, it's probably been, a minute since any of us on this panel have been in 8th grade, but that's not cool in 8th grade. That doesn't feel good for kids. When I taught at Sparks Middle, we had 5 high school feeders, and we had a few that were really, really small feeders into, this little tiny group went to this school, and they were kind of like, yeah, so there's 5 of us on the bus to the high school day, right? It just doesn't feel as great. And so I'm all for what you're saying, Darren. I really, really am. Because I agree with the growth is in the Spanish Springs area, and Mendive is already set. Those houses are built. They're set. They've been built for 25 or more years. I remember when Mendive was open. Missy and I were leaving middle school. We got to vote on the colors of Mendive Middle School. So I was the one who said, hey, we need to look at Beasley and Sepulveda because they go to Reed, and that's where Mendive goes, and we need to look at why they're at Sky Ranch. I was one of the ones that was a proponent of it. But now that I'm seeing the numbers, I just don't see how that works, because it also doesn't solve the problem of Shaw, which is the bigger problem. Like you said, Mendive can take variances. It's a school that's accessible for variances. But Shaw is not really accessible for variances, as we see more kids are variancing out, and there's a charter school right down the street. So that doesn't help them either.
I think with the Beasley Poly Boardman, I get what you're saying with the groups. I think Beasley makes sense to Mendive. If we're talking distance, the people in the Sepulveda neighborhoods in public comment, they're talking about distance to Sky Ranch. So it seems like they're pushing. Obviously we don't have a lot of comments, but they're wanting to stay at Sky Ranch for location. The other thing we need to keep in mind is it's not like when we were in 8th grade. People are picking whatever high school they want to go to. They go to ACT, they go to McQueen for business or whatever. It's not the same where kids are like, oh, I have to be with this unit, because a lot of kids are picking to go to lots of different kinds of schools. So, I'm not stuck on we need to have 2 elementary schools feeding this school, and that's why we should keep Beasley and Sepulveda together. I like the idea of exploring the Beasley towards Mendive just because of location and not dealing with the Vista and all that stuff. So.
Of the two, I would prefer Beasley over, sorry. Of the two, I agree. Beasley over Sepulveda going to Mendive makes more sense.
Yeah. And that being said, there's nothing we can do with Beasley for Shaw. I mean, obviously, there's no pushing that. I mean, maybe there's some things we can do in that back Wingfield area to explore, but, you know, I agree with you, Darren. Like, the growth is out there. Supposedly, we have the numbers soon. It is a little concerning. There's a lot of, like, canceled neighborhoods, so is there going to be as much growth? And then we're sticking Shaw and then, say, Sky Ranch in the boat where they don't get Spanish and stuff. But I do agree with, like, you know, can we build these up and then, you know, see how the development goes?
Melissa Cook, I think moving Beasley to Mendive makes more sense than Sepulveda because it would eliminate, they have at least two ways that they could go, whether they come down Vista or they go down Los Altos to get to Mendive, versus Sepulveda only has Sparks Boulevard. So considering if you've ever been in Sparks, on Vista, Sparks Boulevard, or Pyramid in the morning or in the afternoon, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. Los Altos, part of it's down to one lane right now. Absolute nightmare. Getting to soccer practice at Bud Beasley last night. So at least the Bud Beasley folks would have two different ways to get to and from Mendive. So traffic wise too, that makes a little bit more sense than maybe Sepulveda.
So, Adam, if we were to really investigate the Beasley moving to Mendive, that would not free up the space for the GT program. Would the GT and curriculum and whoever, the folks that make that decision, the administration, would they be willing to look at still moving some kids out of moving that program out of Sky Ranch and potentially making it more equitable in another elementary school in Sparks? Like,
She's asking
right.
to be elementary.
Sorry, in another middle school in Sparks, not elementary. I'm sorry. So at a Dilworth or at Sparks Middle, for example, because they do have the space, and then it would be a more equitable location. Obviously, that's again not in our purview. That's not what we're saying, but it still brings up the equity issue of it being out in Spanish Springs and not being accessible. So that would be off the table for it to go to Mendive then, because I understand in the past they had it, but these numbers would not make sense to move it then. I don't know, just throwing it out there. You don't have to have an answer. I'm not. Yeah, with just Beasley going to Mendive, there would not be room for the GT program.
Right, so the slide that's shown here, slide 27, is the impact data associated with option 3, Beasley going to Mendive. You can see these projections are assuming Beasley going to Mendive. The current variance trend continuing. I'm sitting here thinking about this. The variance policy today limits the number of variances that a school can accept once they reach, I believe, 85% of their capacity utilization. So likely filling Mendive with zoned students via Beasley would limit the ability or capacity for Mendive to accept. So it would actually, not allow as many students to variance into Mendive, which may or may not be a good thing. And, to your point about the GT program, we can talk as staff. I do understand that the program is doing well at Sky Ranch, so relocating it not to relieve crowding may not be favorably received. If it's doing well, and the projections on this slide are including the program staying in Sky Ranch. So just to clarify what that shows.
So what that would, if there's a limit to how many variances Mendive could accept, the close to 200 that they're currently accepting over time as those students age out of that school, those numbers could go down even more, and that would likely put more students at Dilworth and Sparks Middle School because they're not variancing over to Mendive potentially. I know that's really hypothetical. I'm just curious if that's what you meant by that comment.
Yeah, you heard me right, and I really want to study that a little bit more.
Okay.
I'm really thinking out loud here with you, but I think more to the point, it might result in slightly lower enrollments than are projected there if we work on that a little bit more tightly.
Okay.
I just want to study that a little bit more. I think it's helpful to get the flavor of the appetite of this option, right?
Yeah.
Beasley back to Mendive, is that despised, or no, we're pretty open to that? Okay, let me work on this option a little bit more.
Yeah, I think some more information about that one feels like really worth exploring. Again, it still doesn't solve Shaw, but it's, well, you know, we can let you play with some maps.
Well, okay, so as long as we're rehashing a little bit, let me get your deeper thoughts on 2B, which does that to Shaw. It doesn't do anything to Mendive. So Mendive's sitting at 950 with 180 variances or whatever, so they'd stay there. It doesn't do as much for Bohatch. So I don't know how everybody feels about that. But
This is if Spanish, we do the Spanish Springs move and all of Van Gorder to Shaw, right?
Yep, but not adding more to Van Gorder, just leaving Van Gorder's enrollment boundary the way it is. This was our attempt to address the Shaw concerns. But, you know, option 2 or whatever it was kind of overdid it at Shaw. I keep staring at this, trying to figure out how to balance Bohatch and Shaw and all of it, and just wanted to hear more from you guys on this option.
What
I think-
about
oh, sorry, go
2B plus moving GT to Mendive? I know that doesn't address the Bohatch situation, but it helps Mendive. And relieves Sky Ranch. I mean, Sky Ranch is good here, though, so, I don't know.
I like that. I like that. It helps Mendive, and it doesn't hurt Sky Ranch enrollment-wise excessively. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kristen DeHaan, for the record, I'm wondering with the total variances out of Shaw, if you can give us an idea of how many of those variances are going to Sky Ranch. I don't know if Shaw is also a one-to-one school, and could that be why so many people are variancing out? Because they want the one-to-one that they have at Sky Ranch.
I would venture to guess most of the variances at Sky Ranch are the GT program. Because if they're at the capacity they shouldn't be able to take just a choice variance. So those would likely be a program variance. Is my wild guess on that. It looks like the numbers are pretty close to what the numbers of the GT program are. So that would likely be those variances. I guess on this option with 2B, I'd love a little bit more. It's still putting Shaw over capacity, at least for a few years, and there's still some potential for some growth on that side of Pyramid, and so and that's very unknown. I mean, it could be more students than is expected, or it could be less, and so that's really hard to know. But I worry a little bit about overfilling it, and then we're underfilling Sky Ranch. So then we're back to the table again with just the flip side of it with this. So I don't know. I don't know how this, if this would impact Spanish Springs Elementary, but maybe if we weren't taking as big of a grouping of Stonebrook, maybe, and moving Van Gorder, maybe that would make a difference in that number. Or is this one, are we taking any of Stonebrook into Spanish Springs Elementary?
Yeah, 2B has the large Stonebrook option into Spanish Springs, which I think is a winner. You know, Spanish
Yeah.
Springs Elementary is good. That gets the maximum amount of students into Shaw. So I prefer that one. This one is the one that fiddles with that Wingfield Hills area, that rather than putting them into Van Gorder and then Van Gorder to Shaw, it leaves Van Gorder as it is today.
Right.
And that's how you end up with the numbers at Bohatch that are a little higher in this option, because they stay, Wingfield Hills stays in
Yeah.
Bohatch there. You know, I'm staring at this option, trying to figure out, convince myself to rezone that neighborhood into Beasley. You know, that doesn't sound like a good idea, but, you know, I again, to Mr. Fleck's point, you know, we're concerned about the schools that have the greatest potential for growth, or maybe are still in a more dynamic growth phase of
Yeah.
their area. And Bohatch and Shaw are those
Yeah.
schools. So if we're going to err, let's not overfill or leave a bit full Bohatch or Shaw. But this is the option that maybe does the most for addressing the under enrollment concerns at Shaw.
It does. I mean, I'm looking at back to the regional residential development map. I mean, obviously we have a ton going on around Sky Ranch and Bohatch. We've got the whole Stonebrook area, but then you also have across Pyramid Highway, you have that pretty big purple. And that's on this side of the mountain, so you're not sending them to Desert Skies. They're gonna stay on this side of that mountain, I would assume, right? They're in the Hall zone, right?
Yeah, the purple stuff, the big purple stuff that you're
Yeah.
talking about is that 5 Ridges, if you're familiar. That's very much under construction and will be building homes. That's incorporated into the projection data, though.
Okay.
You know, so that's not really an unknown. It's the blue that's behind Hall that, you know, it's out there. It's kind of
Yeah.
one of those like Stone Gate kind of projects, like maybe someday. It's been 5 years out for the last 20 years. But, you know, that Harris Ranch way up north in the Taylor zone, I mean, that's booming. If anybody ever drives that far north, there's a lot of stuff going on up there. There's a lot of growth up there.
Yeah. And so I guess that's where I would err on the side of caution, in that overfilling Shaw doesn't feel right, because we could go all the way getting pretty dang close to Pyramid Lake at this point. I mean, you know, at some point you're going to hit federal land, but you know, you're going to hit the reservation as well, but you know, it's every time I drive out there, I'm like, what? There's a whole new city out here, right? So I guess I would not feel as comfortable overfilling Shaw as I would over getting Mendive really close to their max, especially knowing that Mendive is currently taking a lot of variances, and those students have outlets in Sparks Middle and Dilworth, because that's where they're likely zoned.
And just another point on that, pretty much all these options, we talked just here now and previously on that big, large Stonebrook option. And so we're not doing nothing for Shaw. Maybe we're not doing enough and we're struggling on how can we do more, but you know, that's a significant and rapidly developing neighborhood that is going to increase the enrollment numbers at Shaw.
Yeah.
Should we approve it?
Oh yeah, I mean, they're increasing by 10%, and that's still a, you know, an allocation or two, which helps for sure. Absolutely. So it's not that we're not doing anything, but I was curious if they're just in playing with the maps, if there was anything more we could do. That's all. Okay, I feel like we could probably needle at this all night, but it's 7:30. So anything else? Do we have any other public comment on this item? Okay, I'm going to close this item out. Do we have general public comment?
Pablo Navarone.
Okay, so good point. Having Scott Mill, Delworth is a very small school under capacity, under population. You never know what happened. FIP decided. What happened if FIP decides option D, or you want to combine with Spark Trainer or Dilworth up to one single middle school? Could be having, I don't know what the capacity will look like in the future. I don't know what the FIP final decision for trustee. So, and I want to give an option. So I like the option AB, like maybe rezone all of Vancouver to Shaw Middle School, because you see over there it's very close to each other. One never go to Shaw, one never go to Sky Ranch. All then in high school, they all go to Spanish Medium High School. I feel it makes sense to go to over here to Shaw rather than visiting to Midnight. But that's very overpopulation, so I don't want to get. I feel uncomfortable about Midnight getting overcrowded, because we got a lot to fail to do. Because look at Dunn Elementary School, they need to rezone to Midnight because they're being lone school. Only one school went to Dilworth and went to Reed High School. So we need a lot to work to do.
Thank you so much. Just a point of clarification, Pablo's talking about the facility modernization plan, the FMP, when he brought that up. I just wanted to make sure everybody was. Thank you. We appreciate all of your participation, Pablo. You're very civically engaged. All right. Next meeting is November 16th. It sounds like we're going to need it. Oh, do we have another public comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
Public comment was received for the record on email from Jim Verdi, Sarah Sudtell, Aaron Atkinson, and Trinity Gardner. All of this was presented to you in your emails.
Thank you. I'm sorry. We forgot to read those into record. Thank you. Okay. So next meeting, November 16th. We're going to work really, really hard to have it out in the community. It's not a guarantee, but we're going to work really hard to make that happen because we feel like that's really important. So watch your emails for that, and we will be in touch about that. Okay. Meeting adjourned. Done and done. 2 hours.